Sino may background? Richard, may
Hello,
background
friends,
noise.
and welcome to EMDRCM Live. This is an outreach activity of the Executive Master in Disaster Risk and Crisis Management from the country's premier graduate school for business and management, the Asian Institute of Management. And just to correct myself, the last episode we've had, that was our 7th episode. Today we are on our 8th. But we have been doing the live streaming for 9 times already. The special episode with Prof. Cruz was actually not an EMDRCM live episode. Today I am very happy because we have very special guests. In the past, we have one member from the cohort. This time around, we have 3 very good-looking gentlemen from the pioneering batch of the EMDRCM program joining us for this discussion. And I will let them introduce themselves. And I'm proud to say these are the more engaged and active members in the class. You can barely grab the mic from them when they are responding to questions and discussions in the class. So please, everybody, gentlemen, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. My name is Jason Bunaga. I am part of the EMDRCM 2020. It's a pioneer batch at the Asian Institute of Management. I currently work as a manager and a disaster responder for the Disaster Relief Australia, formerly known as Team Rubicon Australia.
Jason was with us the last episode. He is part of the brilliant team behind the Situation Room, the Skunk Room from AIM.
Yes, I'd like to say that the Situation Room already has a website, and we will send it at the link later for all of you.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. Thanks, Jason. Next, we have...
Hi, everyone. I am Ace Esmeralda. I'm the class president of EMDRCM cohort 2020, the cohort 1. I'm also the president and managing director of ACE and Associates and the chief resilience officer of Resilient Philippines, or resilient.ph. You can check them in the website. Thank you. Richard?
Thank you, Sir Ace. So I'm Richard Legarda. I work for the accommodation sector or hotel industry. I am a occupational safety and health practitioner. I'm also part of cohort 1, and together with me are 3 of our well-esteemed or I'm most proud of people in the cohort.
Okay, we are told to say nice things about each other. So please pardon that. Okay, so welcome back, Jason, and welcome to MDRCM Live, Sir Ace and Sir Richard. I'll call you Chad. I'm more comfortable using that nickname. Okay, today we are talking about this particular question. Whose responsibility is disaster resilience? But before we go into that discussion, I just realized that since the first episode with Dr. Ken, we have been focused on COVID-19, and then when the disaster discussion that we've had with Prof. Vinod and Prof. Cruz was also around either Taal eruption and COVID-19. We've never really went into a deeper discussion about disaster resilience. So for the sake of those who are watching this live stream, let's try to clarify that. And so this is not a pop quiz, gentlemen. Let's just try to explain to those watching what we mean when we say disaster resilience. Anybody can just shoot their answers to that question.
Well, the common terminology, disaster resilience, is basically the explanation of individuals, communities, and organizations that has the ability to recover from hazards, shocks, or stresses without compromising long-term prospects for development or bouncing back better.
Right, and that definition, actually, I was looking at it earlier. I think I saw that from the Coalition of Australian Governments in their National Strategy for Disaster Resilience. Yes, so you mentioned about the ability of individuals, communities, groups, and states to recover. The words that we use in class normally to shorten that is bounce back better. bouncing back better or bouncing back from a shock, a disaster, a crisis event. So, in the context of COVID 19, what does disaster resilience actually mean? What does it mean? Well, how would you describe a scenario where you can say, this particular group, this particular institution is resilient?
Well, for me, the COVID landscape now practically is an unlearning and a learning opportunity for those who can see the various perspective of the situation. Resilience can be viewed on how you wear your hat, what is your position, whether you're in government or in medical care, are you a responder, is your background in disaster response, or what lens are you looking at the situation now. So the word resilience suddenly pop out, and then I've been hearing a lot of a discussion that practically doesn't really talk about resilience because we often confuse resilience with robustness or being agile or being innovative or simply pasaway, no? So we always say that Filipinos are resilient, but actually we're pasaway because resiliency is practically resilience starts with the mindset. For me, it's really the entire spectrum that I can talk more later.
Okay, so in your estimation, gentlemen, would you say that given this particular situation with the pandemic, are we resilient as a country?
No,
No.
in my
Okay.
opinion, no. The
Okay, we
Philippines
have-
is not resilient.
Why?
I mean, in terms of COVID-19, but I can't speak for other countries, but COVID-19 is quite novel, right? I mean, this is the first time even my parents, who is actually a senior citizen, has not experienced these kinds of things yet. However, if we're talking about other disasters that the Philippine experiences, no, we are not. We are definitely not resilient.
What makes you say that, Chad?
That's in my opinion.
What makes you say that?
Come again, sorry.
What makes you say that?
Well, one perfect example is every year we get typhoons, right? We get probably 26 or more typhoons, and we get flooded. People always needs to get reliefs. They need to evacuate where they live, and then after all that, they will go back and then go through that entire vicious cycle all over again. Just like what Sir Ace said, it's the nagiging pasaway na ang Pilipino. They got used to this life. It's a vicious cycle. It should be, if we're talking about resilient, they should not experience the same thing again next year.
Okay, but just to throw it out there, people residing along riverbanks that are rescued year in and year out when the flood comes, they are able to survive the flood. Their houses get destroyed, and then a couple of weeks later, their houses are up again. Wouldn't that count for resilience?
Well, for me, I think I might slightly differ with Richard, but I also agree with him because a lot of us explains that as long as we survive, we are resilient. But if we define it as surviving or bouncing back better, then we might not be really bouncing back better because we still have people exposed to the hazard area. We still have people in the riverbanks. We still have people in areas that we have already identified as geohazards. Practically, how do we call them? Pasaway? Or practically, we can say that there's the lack of political will that we were not able to really give them a nice relocation. Probably we have to look at how other provinces have been doing that. I've been hearing a lot of good examples in Albay, in Bicol area. Probably Jason can expand on those because it's there, no?
Jason? Okay.
I
So,
think,
yeah. So that's I think one of the critical things that we have to consider and be mindful of, because people might equate the resilience to simply being able to survive a disaster. But in
Exactly.
class, as you gentlemen might also attest to this, it's not just simply being able to bounce back. It's actually being able to bounce back better. So if we're aligned, at least in that definition, maybe we can look at what would resilience be. How would you visualize a resilient Philippines in this age of a global pandemic? What would that be? What would that be like?
In my opinion, I guess we have to, well, we're seeing the problems now, right? So a more robust and I guess that's it, a robust health system. That's
Okay.
one thing that our country should actually look into.
Okay. So I'm hearing from Chad that being able to being described as resilient the next time around would be the Philippines having a more robust health system that can take on the challenges of a global pandemic, right? And probably also on the economic aspect of things. Maybe in the future, after we have developed, somebody has developed the vaccine and things have somehow gotten back to the old grind, then we can look at and evaluate where we stand in terms of the resilience of the country in terms of economics. But so this is another question that I wanted to throw to the group. What's the difference between disaster resilience or disaster, um, well, resilience and disaster management? Or are they the same?
Jason? Okay. I'll take the floor for now. Disaster resilience is a term that is already broad, but then to be resilient, there should be that element of disaster response, disaster risk reduction, and then practically management, the impact of the disaster. Because resiliency is not just a phase, no, it's the entire length of being. So in order for us to be disaster resilient, we should always start with preparation. No, preparation is that making our structure better, prepare our lives, individual lives. No, when if you ask me if how does one make himself resilient, it start probably saving money or having a life or a non-life insurance. No, I really advocate people to get their life insurance because I myself is an insurance advisor. I always preach that to bounce back better in a disaster or in a tragedy, it's practically through taking an insurance policy. So the same thing for organization that is composed of individuals. Resiliency starts by preparation, prepared to respond, and then when you respond, manage the response, and then you go to recovery and to rehab. So for me, resiliency, the bigger part is management and then preparation and everything goes into place. No, it's really it's a dynamic thing. It's not just you stage one, you follow the thematic areas. It cannot just be like that. It's practically a loop. No, it's an intertwined structure. No, that's why I have been thinking really of exposing resiliency programming a framework.
Okay. So from what I'm hearing from Sir Ace, they're not the same. Although many people tend to get confused with the terminologies when they see people responding or managing a disaster. They're equating that with disaster resilience. Whereas from your explanation, disaster resilience is a far bigger concept, and disaster management is one of the bigger chunks that builds or drives resilience.
Yes, because
I'm with Sir Ace on this. No,
yes,
go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
yes, because if we, I think looking at the case now of COVID, a person is resilient from COVID, or because he was able to recover, or he was able to respond to the recovery stage because he prepared himself already by being physically fit, no, but by being healthy. So if we look at that mental model of being healthy, prepared, increase your immune system, then you're practically putting your organizations that way. You prepare everything. So it's not just health; it's practically also the financial health. No,
Right.
so people will always think about their individual health and their financial health because if they're gone, their family will suffer. No, and if they survive, they might suffer if they have no money. So resiliency, practically, if you look at other countries, why were they able to go to the hospital immediately? They go to medical care. They subject themselves to testing. It's because their health insurances, their life insurances, their financial health supports their health services. So I think that's one thing that we have to consider. Even in our class, we always talk about that, no? Because the beauty of our class in EMDRCM at AIM is that we consider a lot of matters. No? It's not just being thinking about response. No, it goes
The
beyond
holistic
PowerPoint.
approach.
Yes, it's a very holistic approach. No, because we even have data visualization. We have data analytics. No, we are always told to make decisions based on evidence, and evidence are really interpreting data. So we are data driven. Our decision should be evidence based, and then we should remove our political biases, our prejudices, so that in a disaster, we might see now that a disaster doesn't confine itself to a political line. No, the COVID does not recognize that, oh, I'm going now to another LGU. I will go to an LGU that is ECQ, or I will hit an LGU that is not in GCQ. So practically, we have to look at things in a broader, holistic, and deeper manner.
I agree.
That's the goal of our
I
class.
agree, sir, 100%. I agree 100%. Actually, that's the problem with some companies, in my opinion, is that they tackle these disasters like they know these things, like they can predict how the behavior of every disaster. So I agree on what Sir A said 100%. And also, anchoring to what he said, resilience is just like the pinnacle of the triangle, the top, the tip, and below that is the things that he said, like incident command system, disaster risk and crisis management, response team, and together they're part of the whole system, which is resilience or resiliency.
Okay, so great answers, gentlemen. So from what we've heard, it's a bigger thing. Disaster resilience is a bigger thing that includes the different aspects that you've mentioned, like disaster response. So let's now go into the topic at hand. Whose responsibility is disaster resilience?
Sorry, I had to step out for a bit. Something came up with the situation. Answering your question, it really starts with you, because at the end of the day, even if a disaster, in my opinion, if a disaster strike or a hazard strikes within your neighborhood and you're one of the ones that are affected, resiliency will start with you, because it's still going to take a while for any help to get to you. Whereas from an earthquake, typhoon, or whatever it is. But we also have to realize the fact that when we put it in a conceptual mindset, that in some places resiliency may not be a part of their culture, or may not be part of the mindset because of socioeconomic status, financial capability, or things like that. And also, but at the same time, we also cannot romanticize resilience. Just because somebody can cope right after a disaster does not mean they're resilient.
Right.
Can
Can you explain that further, Jason? I really like what you said. We cannot really romanticize the term. And just because people survive from a disaster doesn't really mean that they're actually resilient.
Yes, because when we look at it, with what happened with the COVID-19, we had a lot of our, countrymen and our countrywomen and countrymen who had to go through all these hardship, but at the same time, they were being told that, well, after a disaster, somebody can go out and drink, or they can play basketball after a typhoon. Well, that's not a very good thing to say, because when you have no choice but to move on, does not equate resiliency. The whole point of resilience, as we have explained in the class, is really to bounce back better.
Mhm.
You're not necessarily bouncing back better just because you can open up a can of
Right.
of San Miguel after a typhoon.
Right. And that links up to what Sir Ace mentioned earlier about the health and the economic aspects of a person. So you might be able to survive the disaster like this one, but at the end of the extended community quarantines, a lot of people are now really bothered by the economic impact, especially as their livelihoods are no longer as viable as before the crisis struck. Okay, so good points, gentlemen. Anybody'd like to add some more about that question? So Jason said it starts with you, the individual. Okay, isn't it?
Well,
Shouldn't it
for,
be the government's responsibility?
not really. Well, for me, I mean, based on in my opinion, remember way back, people. Fevox is actually advocating creating your own go bags or whatnot because
Okay.
72 hours before help comes. So that means we cannot rely on the government. I mean, imagine like a global scale. Every city has fire, earthquake happened. You know, do you really think the government can help you during those times? You need to help yourself so that the government can help you. I remember this joke that Kevin Hart said when in one of his skits that he had to ride a boat. It's like a falling from a river kind of story, and he says like before they started that trip, the safety briefing from the tour guy said you have to be part of your own rescue. So you have to, for example, the line or the buoy or whatever to save your life is 12 feet, and you're at 13. You have to swim to 12 feet because
You
so
cannot
you
wait
have
for
to be
the
part of your
life
own
preserver
rescue.
to go to you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like what Chad was saying, we can't rely on the government. I mean, now the problem that we have now, we were saved by the onslaught of AMBO in a lot of the highly urbanized area in the Philippines. And unfortunately, the way we look at disaster risk resilience is really lowering the risk as opposed to building capacity as an end game to ensure that the risk resilience of our our constituents in the country are going to be are there would be more able to bounce back better after a disaster. That's one of the biggest issue that we're having now, because unfortunately we as soon as the typhoon season comes up and we're still towards this COVID-19 pandemic, you and I both know that the government just does not have the financial resources available to do all these responses or relief all at once.
Yeah, and that cannot
Yes.
be. Yeah, sorry, yes, go ahead.
Yes, when it comes to responsibility, I think it's everybody's, no, to be politically correct, is it's
Okay.
everybody's
Yes.
responsibility. But it cannot be because each one of us has a varying role in our resiliency. We cannot rely that everybody will be leaders. Somebody has to play a role, and then everybody should respect, and the leadership should look at the capacity, the knowledge, the expertise of everybody in a team. No, the main failure probably of most of the leaders is that when they become political leaders or they were appointed, somehow they are there because of trust. But when it comes really to manage a crisis, there'll be a different dynamics, especially if you're a poor communicator. No, if you're good in math, you are good in science, but then you cannot communicate them, then we have a problem. You understand statistics, you
Yeah, I agree.
understand what are the medical terms, but then you don't know how to communicate, we have a problem. Recent case, take for example the last 2 weeks, we have problems understanding what the government is telling us. We have problems with how DOH is interpreting their data. No, but then they're the best. They are the best doctors. They know the data. But then it's how you communicate. It's just like in the army before. It's just like you tell somebody the body behind you and say, get the guide. Then suddenly the last person will say, kill the guide. So communication is really important. It's equally important than interpreting and talking about data, talking about evidence base. If it is purely poorly communicated, because there are so many social media outlets, there are so many media outlets just waiting for a scoop, no, for a misstep, because a misstep is really it's a better news selling than a good
Right, a good story.
information. So
Mhm.
going back to whose job is resiliency, then everybody's job. But what is your role? what is your role in that organization as a country? No, individually. Start with mental health. Are you mentally capable to absorb all the data or the information that comes to you? Can you manage 100 Telegram groups and 200 Viber groups? And then you're given already an information, then you forgot that information is
Was
already
vital.
late.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like what? Yeah, exactly. Go ahead. Sorry. I was just agreeing with what you were saying. Exactly.
Yes, thank you. Yes, but then if you look at it, going back to communication, the real role of why we have communication groups, no, especially the AIM situation room, and then the initiative of Resilient.ph and having that data portal, is that for everybody to see the different numbers, statistics, and they can interpret it well and better and timely. Because in interpreting information or data, what is important is that you know what is the date or the currency of that information. And when you communicate, you just don't post. No, it is probably to all the listeners and friends. Tell your infographics, artists that when they make posters that are well-meaning, put a date. What is that date of posting? Because right now, in just say
Yeah.
in 30 days, we are now in IATF memorandum number 40, probably tomorrow
Number
41, and
40.
then
Yeah.
the next day
Yeah.
42, and in one day we can have
Yeah.
5
The-
memos. So what's important is that we put dates, we put page, no, page one of how many pages, because when we are so quick in exchanging all this information, passing it, forwarding it, we might miss one page, and that one page is very critical. And then that's the
Yes.
start of failure in risk and crisis communications.
I I
I
agree
agree
with you,
because
Sir Ace, 100%.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
in terms of communication, it's how you also communicate it. Like, for example, leaders right now, they show their, well, in my opinion, uh, in PTV, they stream it live for everyone to see. All right? But the terms they use cannot really be understood by people who's not capable of understanding. Just like what Sir Ace said, right? So it's not just what you communicate; it's how you communicate things. Sometimes you really have to use borrowing the words of our classmate Attorney Erickson. Like sometimes you have to make it simple so that other people can understand it. Sometimes you have to talk in academic standpoint for the academe to understand it. You have to choose your channels. So I agree with what Sir Ace said 100%.
Yeah, basically you guys are right. You know, a government who listens instead of lecture, so it could change and adapt to the
Yeah.
needs of the times, not freezes until it dies. You know, armed with science, LGUs have to be adaptive, innovative, and must look into their own circumstances to better address their respective needs. Especially now that, you know, when we're talking about leading in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments, you know, it really is something that LGUs and community as a whole, like what Sir A said, that we have to be like in a mutating state, that we have to be adaptive to the change and continuously adjusting and adapting to the surrounding towards this disaster resiliency and sustainability. And you guys, gentlemen, you guys are all right. It really is boils down to that. To sustain the disaster resiliency of our countrymen.
It would be weird if somebody would comment that one person commenting that they are wrong because we get our information from class and also a combination of sources. So I think it's great that we're showcasing that the learnings from that we're getting from our classes and the experiences from your respective organizations somehow reinforces the collective understanding of where we are and where we need to be. So just to summarize what we've said so far, it's your responsibility to be resilient. You cannot really rely on the government for everything. You have to take you have to do your part. And just like
Exactly.
the visual creates mentioned by Chad, if the raft is 1 meter away from you, you cannot just wait for it to hopefully flow towards your direction. You have to do your share. And Sir Ace also raised a very interesting point. While it's everybody has that role and everybody is responsible for disaster resilience, there's also several groups and leaders who have the bigger role to play. And like where the conversation went to government, especially because they're the unifying factor in all of this, has that very difficult job of really consolidating efforts and helping drive everybody to move forward. And one of the
Exactly.
problems that you identified, communications. So let's try
Yes.
to list down what are other issues that you're seeing. Well, not to put down people, but in general, what are the issues that you're seeing in the way that the current crisis is being handled by those in authority?
Well,
Can I go first?
yeah, go ahead, bro.
All right. Oh, for me, implementation and simulation. Uh, I think that's one perfect example because we have a lot of laws. We know that the Philippines, a lot of other countries, I've heard saying the Philippines has a lot of laws. We have good lawyers. We have good this and that. However, it all boils down to simulation and implementation. We need to improve on those things.
Okay.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the government, no matter what you look at it, regardless of your political affiliation or political despondence, we have to look at it as the great men and women that are working in the government, these subject matter experts that are sacrificing their lives, sacrificing their time to make this country a better place. This whole of nation approach doesn't just start with the government. It starts with all of us. All of us are stakeholders. All of us are, the we every single one of us has to take to own it. We have to be the co-owners of the situation, and we have to be part of co-creating the process when it comes to ensuring that this nation prospers and goes for a better future in disaster resilience. And this is one of those
Yes.
things that, as a student, we really learn here at AIM, this bridging leadership, because with that, it really arms you as a practitioner that looking at the stakeholders is not me. It's about creating a solution from me to we, as they say here at
Mhm.
Yes, yeah.
EMDRCM. And at the end of the day, it really boils down to what can we do more for our nation that the nation may be busy trying to do, because it's doing a lot of things all at once. But we need to be able to help our own countrymen, our own government in terms of what we are trying to achieve, because there are, like I said, there are many great women and men that are working within the government trying to do
Right.
what they can to have a disaster resilient country.
Okay.
Agree.
So we've heard communications, we've heard issues on implementation and simulation. Jason also shared a couple of insights around that. Sir Ace, what do you think are the couple other problems we need to raise to the authorities about the way they've been trying to handle this and building overall resilience for everybody?
Well, I think the government should really, or should have realized already that everybody doesn't have a playbook on this. But then that's a good starting point. No playbook. So if we start from scratch, we should really be a quick learners, no? And then from learning quickly from all the things that we have gathered, we should have a playbook already by now, because we are learning a lot from through the internet, through the exchanging of information of what's going on globally. We will know already what will happen in the Philippines. Yeah, yeah. Jason and Chad have mentioned really that this is everybody's uh, concern. Everybody should have a role on this. We should really have an ownership on this, because if everybody doesn't have an ownership and they keep on blaming the government, then they are like practically dragging everything instead of thinking, using ourselves, no, our brains, our talents in helping. So that's why in at AIM now, I'm so proud of our cohort, because we're the first group, and then we were able to really digest everything in our online classes, which is very frequent. COVID-free classes. No, our classes are not affected, so we learned a lot, and it's so timely that we learned about high reliability organization. So high HROs are really resilient companies. They are built for on robustness with agility, and at the same time having all those, they can be really resilient, because the military is seen also as a resilient organization. That's why when things go, quite quite crazy. You call on the military. If there's a disaster, you call in the military. Not that I am pro-military, being an ex-army officer, but it's because the military is built that way. No, so when we go probably to thinking how do we build our organization into resilience or into a resilient state, then that is a really good topic for us to discuss.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, so going back to that point, let me just emphasize what Sir A said. A highly
Reliable organization.
reliable organization can be resilient. It's not automatic, Sir Ace.
Yes.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Okay, so it's still a
Yeah,
process
it's
that you
not
need to go through. I'm going to raise one other issue that my personal observation about what we might be missing out on in terms of building resilience, and actually even in the very aspect of disaster response. But before that, I'd like to read some of the comments that have been shared on Facebook. This one is from Kirch Hoff. In my opinion, disaster resilience is the goal. Ability to adapt and recover in a disaster with lesser negative effect in disaster management. The latter is the process to be undertaken in order to be disaster resilient. So what Kirch is saying is that management of the disaster ultimately leads to disaster resilience. Care to comment? Disagree?
Yes, I mean that's exactly true. I mean the whole point of it is really the DRR concept that we have now is the old concept. You know, it's really about lowering the risk and increasing the bounce back better capacity of people while sustaining it. Because we can only do so much in training, we can only do so much in preparation. But if we can't sustain the mindset that somebody needs to be prepared, somebody needs to be able to have that mindset that I need to think about it, how a disaster is going to affect me, regardless of your financial or social strata. It really boils down on the communication, like what we have been talking about, and creating instilling reliability engineering, you know, with the mindset of your fellow Filipinos, you know, because at the end of the day, we cannot keep using the same excuse that because they were not prepared because of wrong communication or because of their social standings. It really will depend on the community, like you know what we talked about. You know,
Right.
when the community prepares itself, when the individual prepares itself, regardless of who lives in it, they will come back and they'll be able to bounce back better.
Okay.
Anchoring on what Jason said, it's a paradigm shift. Being a safety professional, changing the mindset of people about resiliency, about safety, that it's quite a very hard task to endeavor, but it's quite fulfilling once you actually, succeed in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm
But I
going.
think,
Go ahead, Suresh.
but I think building onto the case of Jason and Richard or Chad is that we cannot just say that disaster management is already resiliency. Remember that there's also a word called mismanagement. No,
Okay.
so that's why what is unique with the course also is that we are being trained to become strategic leaders and effective communicators among the four targets. So what's important is that when we manage, we practically do the best on management. No? I think that the most important thing is the ethical standards. Where is your heart? Where is your empathy?
Yes.
Well, you know, there are leaders who are accountable for the actions and the inactions, even if we talk about responsibilities of everybody. But leaders take the accountability. But are they really our leaders? No, so that's why there was a question in one of our conversation in the class was that will the COVID landscape change the way we choose leaders? Because for several disasters in the Philippines, as mentioned by Chad earlier, are we choosing our leaders, our political leaders, because they are good crisis managers? They may not even know how to, a lot of them we know already that they grew up in silver spoon and then
They've never encountered flooding or all of these issues that most of the vulnerable members of society are exposed to.
And
they need to learn design thinking.
Okay, gentlemen, there are a lot of comments in the Facebook. And this one might trigger some reaction. So hang on to your horses. I'm going to read it. Thank you, Kirsch, for that. This one is from Jeremy Bueno. Unfortunately, even with Republic Act 10121, most LGUs find no incentive in focusing investment on disaster mitigation and preparedness. In contrast, there's political mileage in disaster response. If
Oh,
only there's a paradigm shift in our
See?
local leaders.
unfortunately, there's two truths to that. There's the very beginning of the statement. I would somewhat disagree because it really boils down again to communication and being able to handle knowledge. Unfortunately, our decision makers are also working with LDRR MO heads that may not even know how to do their job because they have been politically appointed.
Okay.
And even within the organizations of the DRRMOs, they are not have been privy to even navigate on how to invest into green sustainable sources for their community. And unfortunately enough, when we were at the class with Professor Vino Thomas, who's well known for climate change and talking about how to turn green economy for an LGU, is something that it's not readily available yet to our leaders. So at the end of the day, if any of our viewers do join the EMDRCM cohort, then they can take that back to their LGU and say, how can we turn our 3 million pesos and have a return of investment to 90 million pesos? And this is coming from an experience from a municipality in Cebu that exactly did that because they took one of the short courses here in AIM for Strategic Disaster Risk Leadership Management Program.
Okay. Yeah, great point. This one is
Actually,
about. Okay, go ahead.
sorry. Well, from what I'm getting from what Jeremy is saying, he's actually in agreement to whatever we are saying right now.
Mhm, mhm.
Because from what I understood from what he said, it's like we still need the local leaders, as he said it, should have like the proper mindset
Right.
on how to handle this.
Yes,
And we talked
exactly.
about this
He's
in
actually
class.
right. He's actually
Uh,
right.
Disaster response, I'm going to use this term that we use in class, is sexy, is guapo. But disaster resilience is a more critical, more
Yeah, yeah.
inclusive, which is to what Jeremy was saying. It's what creates mileage for them. If you find a local government official
Yeah.
right smack near where the relocatees from a flooding happens, it makes him look, oh, he's doing his job. But the bigger role
Yeah,
is
yeah.
actually
After.
driving the resilience of the community. We have a couple more, and I'll ask you to comment on the other comments. This one is about communications from JV Solidium. I remember when Pagasa warns the people that there are possible storm surges. So the storm surge, people didn't even understand what storm surge is. So yeah, good communication and proper information dissemination is a must.
Mhm. I just wanted to clarify again what Richard said. Like I said, I only did not agree for the first part, but yes, I just want to clarify that the Jeremy, the person that made the comment earlier, well, yeah, he is right. It really boils down, like what you just said, also, Wally, that there is definitely a misunderstanding of the RRM concept. It has been a major contributor to this crisis. LGUs are prioritizing on rescue and response vehicles. These are visible in DRRM,
Right.
vehicles and DRRM offices all over the country. We tend to forget that DRRM takes action before disasters and hazard. We should happen to rather focus on response and recovery rehabilitation effort, and we must promote when it's really wasting the taxpayers' money because it
Okay,
really
yeah.
shows that we have had leaders who were not supposed to be in that time in that office. And at the end of the day, it really is a good example of what we call the fallacy of the broken window. There definitely is a misunderstanding in DRR. So just wanted to, yes, I do agree with that. It was just that one particular part which I
Right.
did not agree on. And what Richard has said, it really boils down like communication and really better understanding of the practices.
Okay.
Fortunately enough, we've had that ability to promote systems thinking, design thinking, and really do a deep dive into how we practice DRR in the country. And hopefully, when we get out of the class, when we get out of the program, we'll be able to help our country or our constituents better in the future.
And the call for the paradigm shift is as urgent now
It's
with what we're
daunting.
experiencing.
It's actually
Okay.
daunting. It's at the door.
Yes, this one is from Lester Barcilio Gastala, and the message is, "You're correct, Sir Ace. In my opinion, some leaders are trying to push themselves to know everything to the point that they become victims of the Dunning-Kruger syndrome. They lack self-actualization to determine that in a crisis like a fire, it's not the president of the company that should lead the team of firemen, but the fire director." Right? So again, probably going back to what Jason was saying about the challenge for leaders and what also was emphasized by you guys, your Ace and Chad. It's you're not expected. It would be great though for you to know the science or the technical stuff about disasters and hazards and risks, right? It will be a plus. But the bigger challenge really is bridging the leadership to include everybody in the bigger process of
Yes, yeah.
establishing resilience. Okay, so this is from Jose Marie Ruby Cruz. Disaster resilience is responsibility of everyone. Accountability falls on leaders. So keep on voting for your incompetent and corrupt kamag-anak and you get what you deserve. Ouch!
Yeah. Oh, I like
That's
that. I
definitely
like.
gonna hit some nerves. That's definitely gonna hit.
Who said that? I like him. I like him
Well,
already.
on Facebook you can see his name.
Yeah,
That's from
Jose
Mr.
Marie
Ruby
Ruby
Cruz.
Cruz.
It's
Good point.
unfortunate because we've been saying that, gentlemen, the entire stretch of the discussion. We've been having typhoons for as long as we could remember. Some typhoons develop problems that kill a lot of people, damage a lot of properties, but they keep on coming, and we don't seem to be moving the needle in terms of improvements.
Exactly,
So,
Wally. You know, it is true. I mean, let's reword it better way. I think a better way to reword what that gentleman has said is we need to let go of the government hierarchical structure and competition. Instead, start gathering inputs for collective impact by organizing all stakeholders, making them collaborate with the government as co-creators of solid solutions. I think
right.
it spelled
Agree.
better.
Agree.
Wow, Jason, you should put that somewhere.
Yeah, you
Right?
should write that
So
down.
you should write that down. Okay, so
Yeah.
I think that resonated. And again, the problem is we understand this what Mr. Rubicus said, but are you really hopeful that come 2022 things will change, even with the massive economic impact of COVID-19 and the seeming gap you identified, the obvious gaps you identified earlier about leadership? Do you think things will move in
Uh,
2022?
it's kind of hard to say because it's not our cohort who's going to run the country, so I don't know. I can't really say anything
Not
about
yet.
that.
We don't know which one.
Yeah, we don't know which one. Probably Sir Ace will be the president of the Philippines, and now we're going to go into a right direction. But well, as a disaster manager or the discipline that we're under or the discipline that we're in, we have to be hopeful. At the end of the day, we have to look at the bright side of things for us to be able to plan for the people in the future. I mean, if you don't have hope, I don't think you can ever think of a proper strategy or tactic to handle things, right?
Yes, but remember that hope is not a strategy. You know?
Indeed.
But then,
Yeah.
seriously, I think the government is also reacting not
Yes.
as fast as we expect it
As
to
we'd
be.
like.
For example, like me, since I'm in the corporate world already in the private sector, I can say that the the private sector, when we make our say business continuity programs, our emergency plans, how we design our command center or operation centers, our crisis management, is that it's quite really faster than how the government respond. For example, this is an impact in a lot of corporations. I think other companies who are listening here, they might try to look at their emergency response manuals, because a lot of that, if they are usually copy paste from previous companies of their officers, is that the trigger to their emergency response is when the government will say public signal number so and so, example, public storm signal number 1. But then we have realized that even there's no signal number one, or there's no public storm signal, you're flooding already outside because the rain has not stopped. That's why the development of the rainfall alert, no? So with the government changing their terms and their going into more details, corporations should also adapt to that. Now, for example, another analogy is that a lot of businesses in the world, their BCP is IT centric. No,
Yeah.
IT centric information technology, or it's given to the finance risk manager, it's given to the IT security managers or IT leads. No, and then in the government, you have that ICS, which is Incident Command System. So when do you activate your incident command system? When there's an accident, or when you're still preparing uh, or mitigating things? When do you activate your EOC, or your Emergency Operations Center, when there's a emergency already? So looking at these situations, now you have a pandemic. There's no
Mhm.
building destroyed. No, there's no server that was attacked. How will you now trigger your business continuity programs? No, it should be programs. It should not just be plans. No, so those things are also, let's say, to go back to the ICS structure. If you look at the word structure itself, there's already that organization. The organization is also a sort of way of controlling the flow of information. ICS was probably started a decade ago, but then you will see that we have already smartphones. We already have Viber chat groups. Your lowest person on the ground can practically send an information that can be read by the one on top. But what's your structure in your organization? Are you going to wait for your number two in the command to tell you what is being sent here when you are in one chat group? We at Ace and Associates, we have clients, and say we have foreign bank clients. Then we have chat groups. The CEO, the president, the chairman of the board are there. And also the lowest ranking responder in an office, the security officer is there. And he belongs to a security agency. So the point there is that we should make our plans, our future plans. I know there are a lot of good officers now who are learning from this situation. They are trying much, no, their best to really change and make our national plans, no, even our national crisis management manuals and all those things reactive. And I hope it is future proof, no, because right now in our class, in our companies, we're already talking how to adapt post COVID. How do we start? How do we restart the industry? I came from the hotel industry. Most of you have known that I've been with Shangri-La Hotels. The tourism industry is really badly hit, and then that's where we have a lot of MSMEs. That's why we focus on the tourism industry. We should focus on MSMEs. That's why we have the thing on learning and giving them that framework.
Right. Now, before I jump into my comment to Sir Ace's explanation, let me just shout out to the people that also commented on Facebook. Ednita T. San Pablo, yes, disaster resilience is everybody's responsibility and deals with all aspects of life, physical, spiritual, moral, economic, and political aspect as well. All of these aspects must be tackled for our country to heal. Jeremy also gave a rejoinder. Incongruent policies make local DRRM planning and governance quite difficult. Take the example of the MGB. It regularly issues geohazard studies to be used for local DRRM planning. Unfortunately, they still issue exploratory permits in areas they identified as high risk. So clearly there's a need to look into the bigger system. And that's why we encourage more people to consider getting into disaster risks and crisis management. Okay, next one we have, okay, so this one is from Jason Biliesa. Inclusive and continuous preparedness until it becomes a culture. Most of the time, the government only provides one-time training to employees and citizens alike. Even the infrastructures, they make covered courts a temporary shelter, but they don't make those covered courts comfortable or readily equipped for the evacuees. Okay, I don't want to get started, on the small stuff, the small details.
It's gonna be
We
a
can
long
have-
night.
It's going to be the entire maybe 6 months talking about each aspects of response, of recovery, and all of those things. But from what I'm hearing from the comments also, it's becoming quite apparent that there are a lot of gaps in governance and the government way of responding and building resilience. So let me
Yeah.
ask this question. What are we doing right?
I mean, the government is definitely doing something right. But, at the end of the day, what everybody's talking about Facebook, we know there is a disconnect in science and technology and research. As the national president of LDRMO, Ben Rodriguez, has told me that, we are less in education of the leadership to the communities when it comes to DRR preparation. And I remember he also pointed out that in the government, there is a shift in patterns of relationship, collaborations, results, and systems where we have not developed, but we also need to enhance it for a deeper response to the current situation that we're at hand right now. So those are already given. But the main point that I think we need to really latch on to here is what is the relevance of the cohort one and the relevance of the executive master disaster risk and crisis management into the Philippines now. This is exactly it. It's what we are really known for, the class, and what we're trying to achieve is really be the bridging leaders to create sustainable solution, to talk about ways that may not be the best practices today. It may not be the right thing to do now.
Mhm.
And I think having that, being able in our class, we are given the ability to put on different hats and look at scenarios and even question our own scenarios to come up with real practical solution in this VUCA world, as they say, in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous disaster environment, because that's what we're at now. And at
Okay.
the end of the day, we can only do so much when we keep talking about the fallacies, the mistakes of the government. But rather, what we are here, as our cohort has been talking about, is we are not trying to criticize the government. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is we know the gaps. We know what we're trying to do. Let us help the government. Let us help in the whole of nation building.
Right.
Because at the end, we're just gonna be like everyone else. That's not what we want to do. We
Right.
want to know that when administration changes, when leaders change, that EMDRCM cohort 1, when we finally graduate, we're going to be at the front lines and the back lines to ensure that all these gaps that we're talking about are the things that we're going to tackle and hopefully have a solution for.
Okay, great thing that we are recording this so we can transcribe the great words that Jason has just mentioned. I will just latch on to the last part about us contributing to finding the solutions. And again, that's a big, big challenge. And to wrap this up, I will also mention one of the problems I see in, well, again, not to criticize, but to offer our opinion about how the whole setup is being executed. I feel, this is my personal opinion, that the private sector is 100% untapped. Well, not 100%, but largely untapped in terms of
Or
the
underutilized. Is a much better word.
underutilized in helping build resilience for the country. Which brings me to this last part of our discussion. What have you been doing in your respective organization that somehow contributes to the building of resilience for the country?
Well, for me, from Ace and Associates, I started with my team and from members of the cohort, the resilient.ph website. And it's not just a website, it's actually a social platform wherein we like to address the VOCA with another VOCA. No? It's for us to be vigilant, to us to have understanding of each other, we collaborate, and then move into action. Those are the four powerful words for me that will really address all the VOCA that has been mentioned by Jason. And then the AIM EMDRCM course validated also my idea on creating a resilience programming framework. It's a framework that practically merges the aspects of what we have done in the corporate and private world, and then of the thematic areas of the government and how they evolve. Now, for example, asset protection and risk management, the APRM of Ace and Associates is really based on the nerve center concept, wherein we analyze data and then make them as important actionable insights to the clients. So if you have already that asset protection and risk management, then you should also have business continuity programs that should be really enterprise wide. Then as you develop your business, your BCP, you should also think of disaster risk reductions. No? This is where you can find the risks and vulnerabilities of your organization, whether it's governmental, GU, or a private company. Then you look at opportunity management. This is very important now because everybody's just thinking of crisis. But crisis is also an opportunity to look at the emerging potential. So how are we going to bounce back better? If we always look at crisis should stop. Then after that, manage the opportunities that comes with crisis management. And then the encompassing thing that really holds all these concepts that we have developed is that the term crisis and risk management. This is important that I have emphasized earlier in this talk. That's what I've done so far, confirming what we have been doing from what we have learned inside the case rooms, online or on site.
Thank you, Sir Ace.
Exactly. What Sir Ace has said, like this concerning what my work with Disaster Relief Australia is a bit different now because we're from Australia, but here at the AIM Situation Room, we were, because of what we learned here, we were able to come up with the very first open laboratory of cross-program collaboration. We took the learnings of the MSDS, the Master of Science in Data Science, the Master of Science in Information Business, the Master in Developmental Management, the Master in Business Administration, and of course with our EMD RCM cohort, to come up with the situation room, to really have an open laboratory where we were able to curate, cascade information, and then send it to our decision makers in things that they may not be looking into. And secondly, I'd just like to point out that really at the end for us here in EMD RCM, there are 5 things that we've learned so far in terms of, in my opinion, what I've learned here so far. It's really having this, as I'd like to say, a mindfulness infrastructure where you have this rich awareness and the capacity for action that jointly facilitate the capability to discover and manage unexpected events before they escalate into crisis and catastrophe. And these 5 things that I've learned so far is really about, we are not preoccupied with failure. Second, we have this reluctance to simplify interpretation, the communications, and sensitivity to operations. We are continuously sensitive to the unexpected change of condition, and commitment to resilience, what we have been talking about here. And lastly, it's about deference to expertise. We follow the typical communication hierarchy during routine operations, but for us, we believe that a data-backed decision, science-based decision, and with deference to expertise is a way for us to solve the problem. And as leaders that are going to be born forth from this cohort, from the Executive Master Disaster Risk and Crisis Management, is to be that bridging leader, to be that horizontal manager, to ensure that decisions that are being done are in accordance to the best possible practice in the best possible solution in this VUCA world.
Thank you, Jason. Chad?
Well, I can't really say anything much more because Sir Ace and Jason already expounded everything. But being in the accommodation sector or the hotel industry, I'm part of a team that's actually creating this resilience rating that can actually change the paradigm shifts, the paradigm of the hotel industry. So I probably, if that takes off, and it will give the industry a much deeper understanding how they can change in terms of resiliency. And probably maybe you can invite the team in your talk show, Wally, one of these days.
I don't have a control with that. I would have to ask our producer, Miss Carmel, and her team.
And then
Yes, Chad. Chad, go ahead.
And I'd like to add that Sir Ace is actually a partner in that dream of ours.
Okay. Well, you see that all of these things are starting to really fall into place. I would like to read this last comment that we received via Facebook from Colonel Norman Navidad Ancheta. Disaster resilience is defining, setting, testing, and monitoring clearly the threat levels, human security, and vulnerabilities, physical and technological environment. We bounce back better, resiliency, where we set our threat level by doable human security protocols. We bounce back better also where we set our environmental monitoring. Uh, that being said, every LGU and NGA shall establish their permanent facility-driven monitoring centers or command centers, integrating them all in an information highway, ICT based, where every centers can possibly communicate laterally as well as vertically. Um,
Yeah.
Quite a suggestion coming from Colonel Ancheta. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to really deep dive into that. But probably in our next discussion, we can invite more of these comments and probably ask our guests to probably come back, maybe even host the EMDRCM Live. Take note, I am not. The only reason they keep on getting me is I'm the easiest to convince because I'm unemployed. But every member of the cohort is actually encouraged to host the EMDRCM Live. So it's not just me. Any of these brilliant gentlemen can be the next host, and we hope to get their insights as well. So all of those who commented and shared their insights through Facebook, thank you very much. We don't have enough time. So just one last statement from each of our guests, one short statement to capture your message to everybody.
Short and sweet. We are here in this class to lead, inspire, and transform our environment in this VUCA world.
Chad?
Oh, short and sweet. It's so hard to say things right now because everything has been said. So, I guess what I can say is that resiliency starts with you.
Yes. Well, I'd like to thank the comments of Colonel Norman Ancheta. He is he's the command center boss there in Valenzuela. I'd like to thank everybody who asked the questions. Thank you participating. I know that you have the heart to attend to this live streaming now. And we hope that you invite others in the next live stream of AIM, EMDRCM, so that we can move forward. We can collaborate and make into actions all our talks here. We should not just stop talking. We should not stop on talking. Talking is not the end. We should really
Yes.
move into action.
Right.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much, and your weekend. Thank you, Wally, for this. Thank you
Thank
for
you for
this
having us.
opportunity.
Thank you.
And to
Thank you, Sir
AIM.
Ace. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Jason. And to all those who joined our live stream, this has been another episode of EMDRCM Live. We
With
will be
Wally.
posting for now. We will be posting schedules of the next EMDRCM Live soon on the EMDRCM Facebook page. In the meantime, also please take note, our sister program at the CSDM is also coming up with the MDM Live. So that's something
Nice.
to look forward to. Again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been very fun. Happy weekend. Keep safe.
Happy weekend.
And let's all work towards
Yeah.
resilience for everybody.
Peace.
Thank you. Peace.
Thank you. Thank
Goodbye
you,
from
Jason.
the
Thank you,
AIM Situation Room.
Yes.